welcome back to the Three-Handed Bandits channel. It's Nathan back with another video for you today, unveiling the 14th ranked team in our 2023-2024 preseason power rankings, the Minnesota Vikings. Now this is a team that last year, obviously, they went 11-0 in one-to-score games. Had a really great season, made the playoffs, and then kind of got their ass kicked by the New York Football Giants and lost in the first round of the playoffs. So this is a team that I think a lot of people are just a little bit lower on. I do think a lot of people are expecting some one-score game regression. However, that is not something that I'm that worried about, and I don't think it's something that's going to limit this team that much. Now, before we get into this team's offseason, their roster, and what their schedule is looking like, please like, subscribe, and share this video with somebody that you care about. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into their offseason. Now, they had a very decent offseason, but they did have one of the best offseason additions, bringing in Brian Flores as their new defensive coordinator. Ed Donatel was not doing a very good job. He was one of these Fangio-style coordinators like Joe Woods and Joe Barry, who just really should not have been in the position that they were in. And so bringing in Brian Flores, who should be one of the top 5 to 10 defensive minds and really help restore a bit of a fear factor in this defense, is a huge addition. However, they're going from a very zone heavy scheme to a very man heavy, so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that goes. But on offense, they really didn't change much. They drafted Jordan Addison with their first round pick and bring in Josh Oliver. But besides that, there wasn't a whole lot of additions. They lose Dalvin Cook, who I think they were kind of just ready to be done with. I don't think it was worth paying him, so I think it was smart to kind of let him go. Irv Smith never really developed, and Adam Thielen's kind of just an aging veteran from the Mike Zimmer era that they're okay with letting go. So offensively speaking, really not much is going to change. It's going to be very similar to what it was last year. Defensively, it is very interesting to see what's going to go on. So they lost Dalvin Tomlinson and Zadarius Smith on the interior. They lose Eric Kendricks as their linebacker, and then they lose Pat Pete, Duke Shelley, Cam Dantzler, and Chandon Sullivan. So we have a lot of change in that back half of that defense. And so they kind of replaced that on the defensive side, bringing in Dean Lowry, Jaquelin Roy, Marcus Davenport, Byron Murphy, and Mekhi Blackman. Defensively, there is some concern about what this roster is going to look like and what they're going to do. But overall, I think bringing in Brian Flores is going to do so much for the long run of this team, where even year one, they may struggle a bit. But I think for the future, they're setting themselves up to be in a much better position, next year and then a year after that. Now let's go ahead and talk about this coaching staff. Now this is, I do think, one of the better coaching staffs in the league. Kevin O'Connell as their head coach is someone that I believe in. I think he was really excellent last year. And I really think, you don't go 11-0 in one-score games on accident. While I do think that is a little bit fluky, I do think that there is some of that to do with Kevin O'Connell and his leadership and his coaching. And then Wes Phillips behind him as offensive coordinator. Kevin O'Connell, runs one of these Shanahan wide zone schemes, more of the McVay variant. The running game is not anything crazy, but passing, they have a very excellent passing offense. It's well called, well designed. And I feel pretty good about him as a head coach. He's kind of a fringe, kind of top 10-ish coach in my opinion. And then, as I said, Brian Flores can do a little bit of everything, but he's going to be really, really aggressive. So it's going to be interesting to see how the defense plays with him, because they are lacking in some talent. They let a lot of kind of old pieces from the Mike Zimmer team go. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they do in year one under Brian Flores. I imagine, year 2, year 3, when they add some more talent, it's really going to help. But I do think this is a very good coaching staff, and we feel really good about it. Let's go ahead and talk about this offense and start off with the quarterback position. Captain Kirk Thuggins. Kirk Cousins is a very fine quarterback. I think everybody kind of knows what he is. Anywhere from like the 11th to 14th best quarterback in the NFL. He is very excellent at playing in structure, but he lacks some of the physical tools to really, extend plays and create plays on his own, and to really elevate an offense. It's something he just can't fully do. But he has a good enough arm. He's a smart enough quarterback to where when he has a good structure around him, he can play very well. And he can give you top 10 quarterback performances in any given week. However, when things do kind of fall apart around him, like the wide receivers aren't getting open or the blocking, kind of lets some pressure in. He will be a little bit erratic. Sometimes he can make some really excellent throws. Sometimes he can make some boneheaded, why you're doing that, Kirk throws. So we know what he is. He's, in that kind of mid-ish, upper mid-ish tier of starting caliber quarterbacks who I think you can win with, but you need a lot of things to go right in order for that to happen. Behind him, you have Nick Mullins, who stepped in and been okay as a backup, third string guy when he's got on the field. And then Jaron Hall out of BYU. This guy has a decent amount of athletic potential, but who knows if he's going to be able to develop to even, be a backup or good player. But interesting player to take a flyer shot on. A lot better than, Kellen Mond, but I'm just biased. Now let's talk about this receiving weaponry. I think it's going to have a very efficient passing offense. That's obviously going to start off with Justin Jefferson, Jay Jettas, who is either the first or the second best wide receiver in the league. For me, I personally have him second. If you have him first, I'm not going to argue. It's between him and Tyreek Hill, I feel like. But, I mean, he's one of the top 2 wide receivers in the league. He can win to all levels. He has speed. He has run after catch, contested catch ability. He's a very excellent wide receiver. Can do really anything that they need of him. Other pieces around him I also do think are pretty exciting. And I think the real number 2 is going to be TJ Hawkinson, who, just things never fully worked out in Detroit. But then when he gets traded here, just a completely new man. And I think this is the version that the Lions were expecting when they drafted him in the first round several years ago. But, he was blocking well. He was getting open. He was running tough after the catch. And he really, really broke out. And I think he's going to keep continuing to where, by the end of the year, he might be the second, third, fourth kind of, that true kind of elite top tier of receiving tight ends in the NFL. So stock is very much up for TJ Hawkinson. And then the wide receiver 2/3 position is going to be between Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne. Jordan Addison is a smaller, skinnier, slender guy. So he's a good route runner. He's not the fastest guy, so he's never going to fully, stack or be a true, efficient, deep threat. But he's somebody that could come in, be a good route runner, and, hopefully give them a nice second option if someone who can get open quickly. And then KJ Osborne, I think, is probably one of the better third wide receivers in the league. Can do a little bit of everything and block, and overall a solid player. Just not, doesn't have the most highest upside. The depth behind them with Jalen Naylor and Brandon Powell is okay. If Justin Jefferson goes down, this offense is really going to start to struggle. But if he's out there, he's such an efficient weapon. It's going to help. And hopefully those other guys don't have to see the field quite as much. For the running backs, Alexander Mattison and Ty Chandler, neither of them, are great receiving backs. Ty Chandler has a little bit more of a receiving back upside. But neither of them are bad. They're both just very basic, okay receiving weapons. And then for the depth, Josh Oliver, Johnny Munt, and Kenny Nwangwu are some okay options. Josh Oliver is more of a blocker, and Johnny Munt's a good third tight end, just as a simple chain mover. Nwangwu has never really developed much more than a kick returner, so I'm not really expecting much from him. But overall, I do think you have a pretty good group of weapons. Justin Jefferson's true, legit number 1 wide receiver. TJ Hawkinson is really starting to develop and flourish and break out and do an excellent tight end. So you feel really good with those 2 pieces. And if Jordan Addison, hits, it's going to give you another really good option. But you still have a safer floor guy in KJ Osborne. So overall, I think this passing offense is going to be efficient, especially if Kirk is playing well and within the structure of this offense. For the running backs, obviously they got rid of Dwayne McBride. He didn't make the team. So, it's Alexander Mattison's backfield. I don't think he has really much competition unless he, has some injury concerns. He's a very fine runner. I don't think he has the explosiveness or the greatest of visions to ever be like a star guy. But I definitely think he was better than, just a backup running back like he's been under Dalvin Cook for a couple years now. So they're giving him a chance. I'm expecting a decent year from him, but nothing, truly spectacular from him. And then, as I said, with Kenny Nwangwu, really just a kick returner, hasn't really proven to do much else in the NFL. And Ty Chandler could be a decent receiving back, but as a runner, he's just whatever. And then this offensive line, I do think we actually feel pretty decent about this offensive line, and mainly with the tackle duo. I do think that this is one of the top, 3 to 5 best tackle duos in the league. I think obviously Philadelphia is probably number one still, but this is really close up to there. Brian O'Neill is I think he's kind of is what he is at this point, but he's an absolute stud. He's a great run blocker, great pass protector, and just an excellent right tackle overall. And then Christian Darrisaw is someone who still could have some growing left to do and could really break out into one of the elite left tackles in the NFL. It was, great decision to trade back and draft him later when they got him. And Christian Darrisaw is starting to develop into an excellent, player. He had a very excellent year last year. And, maybe he could kind of take a step up to be kind of in the next conversation of elite tackles of this generation with like Andrew Thomas. So we feel good about him. I think he still has some upside to grow. The interior group is a little weak, however. Ezra Cleveland and Garrett Bradbury are both just very fine starters. Garrett Bradbury is kind of just a smaller, undersized guy who in the wide zone scheme, has enough speed and athleticism to be a good run blocker. But he just can't fully, hold up as a pass protector just because big old defensive linemen can just absolutely bully him. But he's a good run blocker and overall just a fine player. And then Ezra Cleveland's just a very low end kind of guard. Coming out, he was a tackle that kicked him inside, and he's been a very fine starter. Not anything crazy. He's not blowing people off the ball. He's not perfect in pass protection, but he's a very, very solid guard. The only real hole on this offensive line is Ed Ingram and what we're going to get from him. He's a guy who has not really played very well when he has been out there. So I think he's the biggest weakness. Maybe he could grow and develop. I just don't really know if I see it. I think that's going to be a bit of a weakness for this offensive line. But if they can kind of get around him, then I think, they have a really good tackle duo. It's really going to help this offensive line. Depth-wise, not a whole lot of depth. Elise Udo and David Kessenberry could, come in and be okay. But, if Darrisaw or Brian O'Neill go down, this offensive line will also start to struggle. But overall, when we do look at this offense, I think it's going to be a pretty good unit. I think Kirk Cousins, obviously, if he's playing within structure and everything is, going well for this offense, they're going to be a very productive unit. However, if the offensive line struggles or, Hawkinson or Jefferson, God forbid they go down, it's really going to make this offense struggle and limit the upside of it. However, when things are going well, this is going to be an explosive offense that's really moving the ball efficiently. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good group. I think it's going to be a top 10 offense as long as everything goes well. But, a couple pieces, this offense could easily slow down to be a bottom unit. That's only if injuries happen. If there's no injuries, then this will be a top 10 offense for sure. Now, as we transition to the defense, it's going to be really interesting to kind of see what happens. I will say we do feel fine about the defensive line as opposed to the secondary. Defensive line, you still got Danielle Hunter, who is a really excellent pass rusher. Has never fully developed to be one of those tier 1 kind of elite pass rushers. He's definitely more of a tier 2 type of guy. He can win in a lot of ways, has good power, is a good run defender. Just a really solid edge defender. On the other edge spot, they bring in Marcus Davenport over from New Orleans, who has been pretty good when he's played. If he's played, he's a guy that has struggled a lot with injury issues, because he's just such a freak athlete. And they say you're injury prone until you're not. So maybe he can figure out a way to finally stay healthy. But I just he has yet to prove that he can do it, so I'm not going to expect it to happen. But he's a big, strong, beefy dude. He can defend the run pretty well and has, true elite power to get after the quarterback with the bull rush. So, you have a pretty good edge duo if Davenport, is out there. If he goes down, you got Pat Jones and DJ Wanham, who are very low-end guys who can get after the quarterback and defend the run at a very okay, adequate level. But if Danielle Hunter and Marcus Davenport, both guys who have had injury issues, go down, then it's going to be bad news bears for this defensive line. And then the interior group is very okay. Harrison Phillips, guy, is in Buffalo, then he was here last year. He's just a really good player when he's out there. He's never going to be a Chris Jones or, some amazing star player, but he's just one of those players when he's out on the field, I just think he helps his team win. I think he's a really good player. And then Dean Lowry and Kyrus Tonga are both kind of just very basic starters in the NFL who can do a little bit of getting after the quarterback. And Tonga's a good run defender, but, they're not anything spectacular. Then depth, Cullen Roy and Jonathan Bullard. Maybe they'll rotate in some, but I'm not expecting much from them when they're out there. So overall, though, it's a good defensive line as long as this edge duo can stay healthy. However, with this two, it's no guarantee. The linebacking unit does have some exciting upside. They got Jordan Hicks, who's just a very, adequate low-end starter, a veteran who's been in the league for a while. So he's a smart player, just physically just is not the most, exciting player. But he at least gives them a safe floor of just a guy who knows what he's doing. But then these other two are some guys that have some upside. Both of them are really insane athletes and smart players. Ivan Pace, just a very small, undersized guy. That's, the reason that he ended up being undrafted. But they bring him in here, he ends up making this team. I think that's going to be a decision that a lot of people are going to regret is not drafting him. Obviously, though, he is, 5'10", 5'11", 230, so he's just never going to be able to defend the run at an NFL caliber level. But, he has insane athleticism. He can make some splash plays. I think he made this team for a reason, so I think he'll be able to rotate in and make some plays if and when he's out there. Well, then Brian Asamoah is a guy with a lot of potential. He's an absolute freak athlete. Looks like a safety playing linebacker. I think he ran, like a 4.3, 4.4, like insane speed, run sideline to sideline. And, with Brian Flores coaching, hopefully he can develop even more to become a great or, star linebacker because he has all the potential, athletic potential in the world to do it. So as long as the mental side comes along as he learns the linebacker position, he has a very, very high ceiling and could, end up being a star one day if he can keep developing. But, it's a fine linebacking unit. No one that's really going to, be crazy and win you a whole lot of games, unless Asamoah really, really develops. But definitely not really a weakness of this team. Secondary, though, is where we get worried. So obviously last year, they had that kind of Fangio off-zone coverage type of scheme. Now this year, they're supposed to be doing a whole lot more man coverage. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see, what happens and how that ends up looking here. Also, they bring in Byron Murphy over from Arizona, who is just a very, decent kind of slot corner. He doesn't have that athleticism to really step out and be a, really, good cover player. So he's going to be a really good, corner on the interior. But, if your slot corner is your best corner, and outside corners aren't great, that could be a bad proposition. They got Caleb Evans, Mekhi Blackman, Andrew Booth, and Najee Thompson competing for those starting spots. It looks like Caleb Evans and Mekhi Blackman have one out to start on day one. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how that ends up kind of transitioning throughout the year. Andrew Booth was obviously a guy that was drafted high and just has yet to live up what he was supposed to be. He was drafted in the second round. It's going to be interesting to see if he can look a lot better than what he did last year. Maybe in, switch more man coverage and with the coaching of Brian Flores, maybe he'll help. But, he hasn't won the starting job against Kai Blackman or Caleb Evans, who's a fourth-round pick. So probably just can't play. But, maybe there's a chance that he can kind of figure some stuff out. They bring in Mekhi Blackman, who's kind of a bigger body man corner. And, a lot of rookie corners will take their lumps, but maybe he can come in and be solid. And then Caleb Evans is also a guy with some decent athleticism to be an outside man corner. Just overall, though, none of these guys are proven at the NFL level. You got two rookies and two first-year players. So who knows how this secondary is going to look? Or, they're going to get gashed in man coverage. Are these guys going to be able to ball out and play? Who knows? I mean, they have some good athletes here, so maybe they can kind of figure some stuff out. But yeah, it's a little bit worrisome. The safety group, they do have a pretty good group here. Harrison Smith, still an excellent player. Obviously, his athleticism has slowed down, but he can still come up, blow some people up. And even though he's lost a step speed-wise, he's such a smart player. He's excellent in coverage. So, I mean, you're not really worried about him. Cameron Bynum had a pretty decent year last year. So I expect he's just going to be just another solid, low-key year as being an okay safety. And then Josh Metellus is a dime back, part linebacker, part safety, just a bigger body box dude who can kind of man up some tight ends. He's just a fine player. And then depth, Lewis Cine. In Georgia, he had one of the easiest jobs in the world because all he had to do was stay back and just don't get beat over the top. Let everybody else, all the 40 first-round picks they seem to have on that defense, let them do all the hard work. You just don't get beat. So he does not have a whole lot of playmaking or zone coverage instincts. Was not a great player, and then obviously couldn't, struggle to stay healthy. So he made the team. Let's see if he's going to be able to even get out on the field. Really not expecting much from him. And then they bring in Jay Ward in the 4th round, who could also play a little bit of nickelback if, Byron Murphy ends up having a kick outside because the other guys are so bad. So overall, the secondary is the biggest concern for this team. It is a weakness, I feel like, until proven otherwise. And, it's going to limit what could be a decent year from this team. Maybe Brian Flores will have this front 7 balling out to make their job a lot easier. But, if they have a couple injuries up front, then this secondary, I think, is going to get gashed. And they're really going to have to rely on the offense to win them a lot of games. Now let's go ahead and kind of talk about their schedule real quick. So Vegas has them at plus 260. At the win projection at 8.5. I have them about 8.7 wins. The gap between Detroit and Minnesota, I think, is a lot closer than some people think. I still do think Detroit is a better team. That's why I haven't unveiled them yet. But I think this is still a team that's going to win a lot of games. At Carolina and the 2 games against Chicago, I think they should win those pretty handily. And then I do think that they'll be able to go against the Chargers at home. I think they should be able to take care of Green Bay both times and then beat New Orleans at home and go to Atlanta and beat them. So, right there, I have them right about 8 wins. So I feel pretty good about taking over of 8.5. I think, versus Tampa, Vegas, and both games against Detroit, going to 2 Vegas, I think they could drop that. Those are 4 games. I think they'll probably win at half of those, not put them around kind of the 9 to 10 mark. I do think, they have a couple hard games at Denver, at Philly, Kansas City, San Francisco, and at Cincinnati. Those are 5 pretty tough games I think they'll lose. So this is a team that I imagine is going to be right around 9 to 10 to 11 wins, probably 9 or 10. I think it's going to be a team that's going to be competing for the NFC North. Their last 3 weeks are Detroit, Green Bay, and at Detroit. And so I think those 3 games are really going to determine if they're going to be a wild card team or if they're going to win the NFC North, especially the 2 games against Detroit. That's what is going to determine the division to me. So do I think that this team has any risk of missing the playoffs? Obviously, they do. They have a little bit, just because that defense could be so horrible. But overall, I feel pretty good about this team. And I do think that they definitely have the potential to make the playoffs again and, win the NFC North. So I would bet the over. I would bet that they're going to make the playoffs. If something went horribly wrong, obviously they could miss, but I feel pretty good that this is a safe team and will be an NFC playoff team come January. So kind of just recapping everything, I think we feel pretty good about Kevin O'Connell as a head coach and as a play caller, and then Brian Flores is massively going to improve this defense. So that's a pretty good recipe on the coaching, which is very important in the NFL. The offense, so it's going to revolve a lot around Kirko and Jay Jettis. That's one of the better quarterback to wide receiver connections in the league. And then having TJ Hawkinson there also doesn't hurt. And they have a pretty great tackle duo. The interior group is a little whatever, but great tackle duo. It's going to help a lot. They have a pretty solid front 7 with some potential as long as everybody stays healthy. The cornerback room might be one of the worst situations in the entire NFL. I think coming to mind, the Rams is pretty bad. The Raiders isn't great, but they're definitely towards the bottom of secondary until proven otherwise. But the gap between Detroit and Minnesota, as I said, is closer than I think a lot of people would say. And their schedule really isn't that difficult. Obviously, they have the 5 games that I think are pretty tough. But every other game, I think they should either win or at least be pretty close or competitive in. And I'm just not really worried about this whole 1-score regression thing that a lot of people would tell you online. As I said, obviously they went 11-0 in one-score games, and so a lot of people think they're due for some regression. But even if they go 6-5 in one-score games, they could still have a 11-12 win season. So overall, this is a team I feel pretty good about to compete in the NFC playoff picture. I don't really think that they're a true Super Bowl threat, but this is definitely a team that I feel like we will see playing games when it matters in late January. But overall, if you are a Vikings fan or a fan of any of these NFC North teams, kind of let me know where you agree, where you disagree, and kind of, what you think of my thoughts. Overall, thank y'all for watching, and we'll be back with the next team very, very soon. All right, guys, thanks for watching.